Welcome to our tutorial about recording drums. First of all, let me say that making a professional quality recording of live drums in a home studio is pretty difficult. You need trial and error and a lot of patience to get the sound right. If your drums take is just average rather than terrific, it can weigh down your mix later on. Your drums soloed need to sound really great. Some alternatives are sampled drums and loops, creating drums with MIDI, or using a drum machine. Just get your drummer to play it and then it'll sound authentic. Or you can lay down part of the kit at a time, like the kick and snare, and then overdub the cymbals. If you're using samples and loops, use them dry, without reverb, so you can add your own effects later on without creating conflicts. First of all, make sure the drums sound good live in the studio. If you put the drum set on a riser, you reduce bass leakage. You can put baffles around the drum kit to reduce leakage also. You can also lay down scratch drums and then overdub them after in case leakage is causing trouble. Tune the kit so that it sounds good in the studio and is appropriate for the style of music that you're recording. Use new heads, they've got crisp attack and long sustain. Make sure the tension is the same around the head to reduce ugly overtones. If the snare or toms ring too much, use some plastic damping rings or tape gauze or Kleenex to the edge of the head. Oil your pedals so they don't squeak and tape rattling hardware in place before you start recording. If your snare is buzzing from sympathetic vibrations with another instrument or a drum, wedge some cotton padding between the drum and the stand. Now you're ready to mic the drums. If you're going to record them live, keep your setup simple. The more microphones you have, the more complex it gets to mix later, and all of the extra mics don't necessarily improve the sound. Start with 4 mics, one for the kick drum and one for the snare drum. The other 2 should be hung overhead to catch the toms and cymbals. Record each to its own track because it really helps to EQ the kick and snare separately so you can remove the sound wash of the cymbals from those tracks. The kick drum needs a mic that can handle high sound pressure levels. A large diaphragm dynamic mic would work best, like the AKG D112. Put the mic in front of the drum, so you need to take off the front head. Dampen the batter head from inside with a blanket. This keeps the good thud without the over-ringing of the head. A good kick has a lot of low-end thud plus the crisp attack of the beater on the head. The low aspects are balanced by the sharp snap at the beginning that defines the timing, whereas the thud is what gives you the power. An all-purpose dynamic mic works for the snare like the Shure SM57. The most popular microphone for a snare drum is a cardioid dynamic with a presence peak to add attack, pointed at a 45-degree angle aimed at the center of the top head. Remember that the snare is more audible than the kick. The tuning, how much crack at the attack, where it hits. Make sure the pop of air from the hi-hat doesn't hit the snare mic. Aim the snare mic away from the hi-hat. You can even use foam or a pillow to block the hi-hat sound, or just overdub the hi-hat afterward. For the overhead mics, use 2 of the same condenser microphone hung at least 3 feet over the kit, angled slightly away from each other. If you mic closer, you'll pick up too much low frequency from the cymbals. Remember that the cymbal edges radiate the most highs. The hi-hat should sound bright and a little noisy with a clear attack. It provides high-end pulse and a really human element to the drum tracks. High toms should have a strong attack with pop, and low toms should give you that oomph without a biting attack. The ride cymbal should ping and the crash cymbal shouldn't blast out over everything else. To get the crisp ping of the cymbals, you'll want a microphone with a good high-frequency response. If you want to try more mics, here's a typical setup for a rock drum set. You can mic the toms individually, this'll sound more bassy, or you can put a microphone between each pair of toms. Use a cardioid dynamic angled at 45 degrees, about 1 inch or 3 centimeters from the drum head and 1 inch from the rim. The proximity effect of the cardioid gives an extra fullness. If toms pick up too much cymbal, aim the dead zone of the mic at the cymbals. With the cardioid microphone, remember that the rear will reduce the decibels considerably. Once you're done miking, get your drummer to play. Listen for rattles and leakage by soloing each mic. Don't wear out the drummer, though, by being too obsessed getting just the right sound. You can also use a noise gate on each track to keep the sound tighter. Don't be afraid to mix a drum machine with some real drums. You can record your drums from the machine or even make them from samples and then add real cymbals later on. The kick drum needs to be the loudest. That's because our ears are less sensitive to low frequencies. Set your kick level first and then base everything else on that. Different music styles need different drum mixes, but here's a general formula. Give the snare about 70% of the kick's level, the hi-hat about 55%, and the cymbals about 60%. Toms can go louder since they don't occur as often as the others. Traditionally, a drum kit is panned to represent what listeners might hear if the drums were set up right in front of them. The kick at center, the snare a bit to the right, and the hi-hat halfway left. Crash cymbals, the toms are panned differently by pitch. The highest tom will go far to the right and the lowest on the left. Crash cymbals are panned slightly left and right, with the ride cymbal halfway left. Spreading out the drums across the stereo image means that each drum will be more audible and it won't sound clumpy. Let's talk for a moment about other types of mic'd percussion. For big, loud sounds, use a dynamic microphone, which is less likely to distort at high sound pressure levels. The more rock and roll a sound is, the more likely you are to need a dynamic microphone. Watch for shakers and tambourines. Even if you think you've got plenty of headroom, one hard shake can send you right over 0 dB. Use a condenser mic to capture these kinds of detailed highs. And this concludes our segment about recording drums.